Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:06, and we're getting you where you need to go this Thursday morning, 30th day of May. Thanks for tuning in. Coming up at 6:35, Brent Bozell on how the media is covering the Trump trial. 7:05, Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch. 7:35, Nick Minnock from WJLA on more outrages coming from the Loudoun County school system. 8:05, the chairman of the RNC, Michael Whatley. And then at 8:35, journalist Miranda Devine of the New York Post on the upcoming Hunter Biden trial. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Mercedes Schlapp.
Hola, buenos días, señor.
¿Cuántos cuestan los zapatos? Well, that's a reasonable question to ask.
That is a reasonable question.
I asked. I remember something from 15-year-old sophomore Spanish class.
When you were trying to hit on the girls.
Yes, that's exactly what I learned.
Hola, niña bonita.
How to pick up the
muchacha.
Girls in high school. All right, Mark Paoletta joins us now. Let's get serious. He's a senior fellow at the Center for Renewing America and co-editor of the book Created Equal, Clarence Thomas in his own words. And Mark, I summarized Justice Alito's statement back to Dick Durbin and Democrats who asked him to recuse over his wife's flags that were flown out in front of their home. I summarized it by saying Justice Alito told the Democrats, bite me. And now I know that that's not exactly the legal definition of what he said, but basically that's what he said, right?
Larry and Mercedes, thanks for having me on. Absolutely. It's such a beautiful response. It's, such a beatdown of this ridiculous letter that White House, Senator Whitehouse in Durbin had sent in to the Chief Justice, not even to Sam Alito, and walks through the law, why he's required to sit. That's the interesting thing, right? You have a duty to sit as a Supreme Court justice unless there is a conflict. There's no conflict here. It's the springtime. It's near the end of the court term. It's another day that ends in Y, and so the left is attacking the Supreme Court, attacking these Supreme Court justices. And what's really happening here is that, they're trying to shrink the court, right, by forcing recusals. That's
right.
Really
and
what's
specifically on the January 6 cases and whether Donald Trump has, this is election interference is what it is. And I'm looking, they're not even being shy about it, Mark. This is May 29th. This is yesterday in the New York Times opinion piece, guest essay, Jamie Raskin, how to force Justices Alito and Thomas to recuse themselves in the January 6 cases. I mean, Mark, they're telegraphing their shot.
Yes, and that's such an absurd. That's so ridiculous. There's no one who can. The people who are responsible for recusals is the justice themselves. That's how our system works. This bizarre, ridiculous, wrong op-ed that Raskin has put in the Times is just ridiculous. It is election interference. It is disturbing too, right? That both senators are trying to actually meet with the Chief Justice to force recusals. A recusal is a judicial function, is a judicial decision. So this is in the middle of a case, and they are interfering in an ongoing case. So that's disturbing too, right? And it's this thuggishness, right, that they are sort of this Damocles sword hanging over the justices, that we will come after you if you don't do this. Kind of what we saw with Schumer, right, back in 2020, March of 2020, directly addressing Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, saying you better vote a certain way or you won't know what hit you. The whirlwind will be released. And that's the same thing here with White House and Durbin. And it's the thuggishness. We lived through a terrible Supreme Court era, right, where lefty justices handed down these terrible decisions year in, year out, even though they were appointed by Republican presidents, unfortunately. But we didn't go, attack justices. We didn't go to their homes and picket outside of Justice Brennan's home and make his life a living hell. That's what they're doing here. And what you also see here too, right, Larry and Mercedes, as you well know, like the left is so uncivil and despicable, right? They attack Martha Ann Alito, who I know, who's a great patriot, who's a great person, who's a strong woman, and Sam Alito, same thing, a great patriot, great man. And they make their lives a hell in their neighborhood, right? Walking down the street, saying the vilest things to Mrs. Alito. This is the left on display. You see it both kind of in the personal realm and also legally, if you will, in terms of trying to attack the Supreme Court and undermining it.
And Mark, it started even, before Alito, when we saw, for example, the trying to publicly humiliate Justice Brett Kavanaugh and his wife and his kids with that horrific hearing that we saw going back to his high school days. And then you've got, Clarence Thomas and what Ginny Thomas had to put up with, which was outrageous. These are coordinated leftist campaigns trying to destroy conservative justices. It is disgusting. And, I got to ask you this. I love how Justice Alito, you got to ask your, he basically said that, talking about his wife, Martha, she makes her own decisions, and I have always respected her right to do so. She has made many sacrifices to accommodate my service on the Supreme Court, including the insult of having to endure numerous loud, obscene, and personally insulting protests. I mean, he is standing up for his wife. I mean, how can these justices basically survive these trials? I mean, because this is something that's becoming more and more politicized as we're moving forward.
Mercedes, you know what? I think it's calling out the left more and more. They need to be strong, but they also, what you learn, and again, that's, is that when your friends stand up for you, it helps, right? When people stand up for you, when institutions stand up for you. Unfortunately, right now, right, the bar, even the Federal Society, I don't see any groups out there as an institution, right, standing up for the justices, standing up against these attacks. Right, the ABA, the American Bar Association, used to. I think Justice Alito, he had to go out I think it was last year, and write an op-ed, right, defending himself for not recusing on another case, I think it was, and he said, times have changed. It used to be the organized bar that would defend the court. Now I have to go out and do it, essentially, right? And so that's why I try and get out there, and I'm grateful to come on your show and for you guys to talk about this, because the American people need to understand that this is gaslighting, and this is dangerous, and it needs to be called out. And I saw a poll recently the other day, the Supreme Court. It was a Harvard-Harris poll, Mark Penn. 52% had a favorable view of the Supreme Court. That is really encouraging to me, right? After all of these attacks and all that stuff, and the court's approval had gone down into the high 30s, low 40s, still above the Supreme Court, still above the media, but it seemed like it was ticking back up. And, it will go up and down. The court isn't supposed to be a popular institution, right? It's supposed to be respected. But I was encouraged that it was a 52%, I think it was last week or the week before, after all these attacks. And so that's what's happening here. The left wants to attack the court, slime them up, hopefully either force them to recuse, or, trim their sails in their opinions, right? And then, down the road, maybe try and pack it if they win in 24. That's why the elections are so important, because if the left gets a hold of everything, they will try and pack the court, meaning put 4 more justices on, add 4 to counter, the conservative majority right now. And they don't really even an independent court. That's what's fundamentally at issue here. They want to control the Supreme Court. They've controlled it for years, and they don't anymore.
Well, Mark Paoletta, the Thomases and the Alitos have a good friend in you, and the country has a good friend in you to call this out and to show these attacks on the Supreme Court, the institution of the Supreme Court, for exactly what it is. I appreciate you joining us. There's one good thing that came out of all of this. The city of San Francisco has removed their appeal to heaven flag from in front of City Hall. So that long national nightmare is now over. Thank goodness. The New York Times got something done here.
I bought a appeal to heaven flag and have it flying out proudly outside my home, and people should do that too. I would encourage folks to take those symbols and use them for their own messaging, which is, this is America, we love America, we're flying our flags, just like Mrs. Alito, a great patriot.
You go. If you do touch base with the Alitos, please send them our best and tell them we appreciate everything that they're going through. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Larry.
Thanks for saying 6:15 WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes. First on the fives with James.
WMAL. Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Upgrade to a new walk-in shower from Long Baths. Call now to get your free estimate today.
Later this morning in the Chris Plant Show, Judge Merchan in New York prepared the jury by issuing them ropes and trees. 9 a.m. on WMAL.
Yesterday, as you know, the judge gave the instructions to the jury. The jury are now deliberating. Well, not the second. They're sleeping right now, I hope. Or they should be waking up. I hope
they might be waking up.
You never know. Judge Jeanine Pirro. You like that Judge Jeanine, don't you, Mercedes?
She's lovely, yes.
Met her over at a CPAC one time. She's not very tall.
She's not very tall.
No, not so tall. Tiny little judge.
She's feisty, very feisty.
She is. And she had plenty to say about what she saw in the courtroom. Let's start with cut 3 here, Mr. Shelton.
To me, it was a very difficult day today. I heard a man with a robe instructing a jury that on issues that I know as a former judge, exactly as he was, were just plain wrong, reversible error. I was stunned at what he brought up and what he said, and specifically, I refer, number one, to the fact that we've been talking for weeks, months actually, since this indictment came down, as to what is that unknown felony that will be used to resurrect 2 dead, expired misdemeanors. Well, that unknown felony is an election law violation, according to this judge, that is made up of a federal campaign violation, of a creation of a false record, or of a tax law violation. Mm-hmm. The Trump defense team didn't know this, so they couldn't speak to it. And it is a Fifth Amendment requirement that you know the charges against you, that you know it in the indictment, in the bill of particulars, in discovery, in the opening statement, and through the testimony. This was, and I knew it during the prosecution summation, this was clearly, it was like a game between the prosecution and the judge where the defense was left out of it.
Yeah, that sounds bad. I've been saying this forever. It's like at some point they have to say what the other crime is so that Trump can have the right to defend himself against that crime.
Right.
And how do you forget about having to prove the crime? How does somebody have the opportunity to defend themselves against the accusations of the crime? And that apparently is irrelevant.
Yeah, and it's why this raises broader questions on Judge Merchan, obviously his political motives, why he's doing this, how you got to ask yourselves what were the coordinated attempts with the prosecution, how is the White House involved in trying to take down Donald Trump in an unconventional way, something that we should not see here in America that's happening.
And then there's the jury instructions, as I said, 53 pages long, but took an hour to tell. Listen to how the NBC News legal correspondent, this is, by the way, Laura Jarrett, Valerie Jarrett's daughter.
Wow.
Here in cut 5, describing exactly what the jury is dealing with these instructions.
These are the instructions that the jury has to follow in Donald Trump's hush money trial before they can reach a verdict. 53 pages. This is complicated. This is lengthy stuff. It took the judge over an hour to read it. But guess what? The jury doesn't get this in the room during deliberations. They have to write questions, they can write notes, but they don't get these instructions. In New York, both parties have to agree and the judge has to agree. And in this case, it didn't happen. They don't have this in the room right now.
Unbelievable. I can't even begin.
It's like blinded mice. It's like, sorry, here you go. Let loose in the room. You have you're not going to have any instructions to make your decision.
And again, this is the process. System. This is the process being used to prosecute a former president for the first time in the history of our country. And, oh, by the way, the leading candidate for president right now, running against the current president, who is of the same party affiliation as the prosecutor and as the judge and his fundraising daughter, of course. Let's go back to Judge Jeanine here, and she can summarize exactly everything that's wrong here. It's cut 4, Michael.
Of course, we know that there was no evidence allowed of a federal election campaign violation because the defense was not allowed to put on Brad Smith, who was the head of the Federal Election Campaign Commission. But they were allowed to hear that Michael Cohen committed a federal election campaign violation and that David Pecker was advised not to engage in certain conduct because it was an FEC violation. So the prosecution put on evidence. The defense wants to put on evidence of what an FEC violation truly is and is not allowed to do that. And then the defense of advice of counsel was not allowed. That's what Trump wanted. He wanted to be able to say, I did this on the advice of Michael Cohen. Now, all of a sudden, we hear Michael Cohen is the co-conspirator who was aiding and abetting Donald Trump. And now you can't convict just on the word of Michael Cohen without corroborating evidence. But as it relates to that felony, which will bootstrap this and bring it to life, you don't have to agree on any one of the three. It doesn't have to be unanimous. This is a kangaroo court. You've never heard of anything other than a unanimous verdict in a criminal trial. And here's a new one. Legal expenses are, if you report them as income, is a crime. I wrote it again. Reporting money as income when it's reimbursement is a crime. So the judge is saying that itself is a crime. No one knew that. They could have argued it at the trial, but they didn't have the opportunity. So, I mean, those are just some of the issues. It was a sad day for me. I sat with Andy McCarthy and Jonathan Turley and Trey Gowdy and Shannon. We were all like, oh, this is unheard of.
Unheard of.
And there you go.
I know.
This is how we handle things in this country. And again, I want to repeat, why do you have to go to such desperate measures to stop your political opponent when you got more votes than any other candidate in the history of our country, Mercedes? It's weird that Joe Biden is going to these lengths, isn't it?
Well, two things. One, Joe Biden wants to be able to say Donald Trump is a convicted felon. Then he can get off the debate stage pretty quickly and then try to make this argument, which is going to backfire. It's going to completely backfire. You mentioned it. You're going to be like, well, if he's a convicted felon, oh, well, is he going to make sure my inflation goes down? Is he going to make sure we're safer here in America? I'm sorry. The voter's not going to believe that. And I do believe that Democrat playbook tactic will backfire on the Democrats. It already is. But secondly, the bigger issue here, Larry, is that they're literally polluting. They are dismantling our judicial system. There's no way you can live in a red state anymore. If you live in a red state where you live in a city where the judge you can't trust the judges, you can't believe you're going to get a fair trial, this is problematic. And the problem is the judge is setting it up to make it impossible for the jury to have what they need to make a decision. So you're going to have to rely on smart jurors to basically say, okay, this is, I can't, I'm getting frustrated. But I think to the earlier point we were talking about this, the reality is that the longer the jury takes, there's more disagreement. It does, I think, benefit the defense.
Maybe. It's 6:25.
Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It is 6:37 now on a super busy Thursday morning. I want to get right to it, but I also want to let you know who we've got coming up. 7:05 Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch. 7:35 Nick Minnock, WJLA, on more scandal coming out of Loudoun County Schools. 8:05 RNC Chairman Michael Whatley. And 8:35 Miranda Devine, journalist at the New York Post. She knows a thing or two about Hunter Biden, who's about to face his own trial date. That's all coming up. It's Mercedes Schlapp Day this Thursday. Good to see you, Mercedes.
It's Larry O'Connor Day. Every day.
It surely it feels like every day. I get weekends, though, don't I?
Sometimes. It depends.
Not this weekend. We've got the Free Speech Forum at the Birchmere this Sunday. So that's not like
you're
work.
Kidding. Can I crash it? I should totally try to go.
That would be fun, actually, if you crashed it. But it's already going to be a zoo. Mark Levin, Chris Plant, and the Patrice and Julie will be there, and the whole team. The Vince Colonnese, of course, and you, if you've got your ticket early. All right, let's get right to it with Brent Bozell. He, of course, the president of the Media Research Center. And, well, Brent, I guess the media had two ways to play this. They could either be incredibly circumspect and objective and cover this groundbreaking trial, this first in American history attempt to prosecute a former president and a current presidential candidate in a very sober and serious way, or they could be partisan hacks. Do I need to guess which one they chose?
Well, you're right. You're right. And good morning, Mercy, too. Look, this is so serious that you should expect the networks to treat it seriously. They cannot get away from politics. If you look at the total number of amount of coverage since the jury selection began, there have been 640 minutes of coverage of this. Now you can say, well, look how important this is. Look how significant this is. There's going to be a massive amount of coverage. And I'll agree with you completely. But now look inside that coverage, which we've done. If you look inside that coverage, you'll see that they're out of the 640 minutes, the networks have spent 244 of them with completely biased coverage of Donald Trump. Let me give you some examples of this. I want to give you a hypothetical. Let's just say hypothetically that President Barack Obama, made a $130,000 payment to a mistress, allegedly, for some second crime, allegedly. And let's pretend that he was being tried by a white prosecutor in the state of Mississippi. Do you or do you not believe that every single network show would tell you that? Would tell you that he's in Mississippi with a Democrat who's investigating him and trying him. So what do we have in this case? With DA Alvin Bragg, who's a Democrat, who's prosecuting Donald Trump. Get this number, out of 110 evening news stories, only 3 hinted that he was a Democrat. On NBC, on nightly news, there were exactly 2 references. On ABC, they let it slip once, and that was Donald Trump quoting it. And CBS never once permitted that on the trial. It gets even better than that. What about Michael Cohen? The whole key to the Trump defense is that he is a serial liar and a convicted perjurer. Nearly 1/3 of the coverage discussed Michael Cohen. And yet, guess how many times they mentioned his conviction for perjury?
I mean,
3 minutes.
Stop it. That's one of the
minutes.
It's one of the most defining characteristics of Michael Cohen, for God's sake.
The key to Donald Trump's defense was given 3 minutes out of 640 minutes. It gets even better than that. How about Judge Juan Merchan? How many evening newscasts told viewers of the conflicts of John Merchan, including that his daughter is one of the top fundraisers for the Democrats, including that he's a donor to Joe Biden, and that he supported also another group called Stop Republicans, both in 2020? Now, Joe Biden is the incumbent running against Donald Trump. I can't think of a greater conflict of interest. I cannot believe this man didn't recuse himself from being the judge on this trial. So, how many newscasts? Answer: it's not one.
Yeah.
None.
Not one ever mentioned it. So, if you're a viewer who gets his information from NBC, ABC, or CBS, you don't know who Michael Cohen is. You don't know the conflict of Bragg. You don't know the complete bias of the judge against Trump, as evidenced by his own personal record. You know none of that. And all of those things are absolutely... But guess what the networks did do? They used the word criminal 100 times talking about Trump. And they use the term felony 18 different times. So on average, more than one time in every story, they said that he was a criminal, or that he had criminal charges.
Let me ask you this: who's the worst culprit here? Is it like MSNBC, CNN? Out of all the networks, who's the one that you're seeing that is really covering this just in the worst way possible?
Well, I mean, if you look at the cables at NBC or CNN, they're rather synonymous and they're rather redundant, and all they do all day long is they attack Donald Trump. But if you look at the networks, the worst is ABC.
Yeah.
Wow.
ABC.
Yeah, the house that George Stephanopoulos built is the worst.
Yes.
Absolutely.
40% of all the coverage has come from George Stephanopoulos, who is a lifelong liberal Democrat with a liberal Democrat activist donor background.
It makes you wonder if he's like secretly advising the Biden campaign in that sense.
I don't think it's that secret anymore.
I
think he's too good. Honestly, I think he's a better political analyst than what is coming out of the Biden Excuse me, better political consultant than what we're actually seeing from the Biden campaign. If they were listening to his advice, they'd probably be doing better because
they wouldn't have sent Robert De Niro to the sticks.
Yes, exactly.
Let me answer this way: the importance of this for the Biden campaign. National polls shows that Trump has a narrow 46 to 44% national lead. Now, the number of people who say they get their information primarily from national news networks said they prefer Biden by a landslide of 65 to 35%.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
This is playing to the Biden base and, more importantly, to the Biden message. You know, folks, I don't like going in this direction, but let's remember this. The broadcast airwaves are owned by the American people. This is a deliberate attempt to interfere with the election. When you don't cover these things like Alvin Bragg or Michael Cohen or the judge's background, you're doing that deliberately doing that. You know these things, and you're deliberately keeping them. So I really do believe it's high time for Congress to hold hearings on this. These airwaves belong to me. They belong to the two of you. They belong to the American people. And the networks have no right to try to steal elections this way.
Brent Bozell, Media Research Center, well done, as always. Your team of researchers and your ability to encapsulate it and communicate it is just absolutely incomparable. And it's always good to have you. I appreciate it. And one of the things that really sticks out to me that you've laid out here, forget about the political bias, which is awful, but the viewers are uninformed. They don't know the facts. I can guarantee you, if you watch Jake Tapper, you watch George Stephanopoulos, you know everything there is to know about Stormy Daniels, but you know nothing about Michael Cohen. You know nothing about the underlying crime. You know nothing about the jury instructions. They're ill-informed and uninformed.
And how often do those elites say that conservatives are uninformed?
Right.
How often have we heard them say that?
Yeah. All right, we got to leave it there. Brent, thank you as always. It's always great to have you. You're a good man.
Thanks, friends.
It is 6:45 WMAL traffic and